Since this is a very important topic and our devotees seem to be struggling with this, um, it is my duty to further clarify and explain it. Um, Sadaputa Prabhu, who was ISKCON's Bhaktivedanta Institute scientist, had written a book, uh, Alien Identities. For some reason I don't have a copy of this book right now, but in one of the appendices he had spoken of how three different groups of people have three different ways of accepting statements presented in Vedic literature. And I think it's very important that we understand this. So first of all, he talks about one group whom I will simply call the literalists. What do the literalists do? Sadaputa Prabhu takes up a narration from the Mahabharata. We know there was a time when Arjuna had gone on exile. There's a reason why he did so. Anyway, he went on exile. He was accompanied by certain brahmanas, and he reached a pond or a lake, and I think it was a lake. It was a water body, and he took bath in that lake. And the Mahabharata text says that there was a Naga princess from the underwater kingdom. There was a Naga princess, Ulupi. She pulled Arjuna when Arjuna was underwater taking his ritual bath. She pulled Arjuna down to her mystical kingdom, and she requested him, "Can you please marry me and give me a child?" So it is described that he married her, and then the next day she sent him back, or after some time she sent him back. So now Sadaputa Prabhu brings up this question that look, how would a person understand this? Well, to those who are traditional followers of Vedic civilization, including authentic members of the four Vaishnava Sampradayas, they will simply take it literally. Yes, this actually happened. Arjuna went to take bath in a lake or a pond or whatever, and as it has been described in the Mahabharata text, this Ulupi, she's a Naga princess, she's a superhuman being, and she actually pulled him down to her mystical kingdom, and he married her. This is literally a fact. So they will simply say it like that. Then you have another group, I will call them the mythologists. The mythologists, these are like modern academic scholars, or even the common so-called educated person, specifically the so-called science so-called educated person. He will immediately say, "Oh, this is just rubbish, this is just nonsense. Human beings require oxygen, and Arjuna is not described as having some oxygen mask or something when he went down, and it is impossible for Homo sapiens to survive below water for one full day and night, and obviously there's no question of a Naga princess and so on. There are no mermaids. This is all just some mythologies, just some nonsense. These things never happened. It's simply false, because we all know from science that these things are impossible." So there are people who believe in the various views and beliefs espoused, presented by scientists as gospel truths. So they'll simply dismiss this as a mythology. And then Sadaputa Prabhu takes up for discussion how there's another group of people who are somewhere in between both of them. He calls them accommodationists. What do these people do? He says that usually these are educated Indians who have some respect for their cultural knowledge and their literature, their sacred lore. So they would say something like, well, Arjuna was an historical figure, the Pandavas were historical figures, but they were probably just some North Indian tribe, and Udupi must have been a historical figure, but she must have belonged to some other tribe, and Arjuna must have gone on an actual Tirtha Yatra, pilgrimage, as an atonement for having done something wrong when he was sent on exile. So that also must have been true. However, we know from modern science that you cannot live underwater, and certainly you cannot marry a woman, and you don't have kingdoms underwater and so on. So the accommodationists, they will simply say, well, Arjuna must have gone to take bath in a lake, and perhaps on the other side of the lake there must have been a tribe called the Nagas, and the princess from that tribe, she must have been swimming from the other side of the lake to this side of the lake, and she must have pulled Arjuna underwater and actually taken him to the opposite bank, and they must have gone to the bank, and they must have lived together for a few hours or whatever, and then the next day she must have put him underwater again, and he must have come this way, and this has been poetically expressed through a fantasy which has been interwoven into the Mahabharata. So they don't take it literally, and Sadaputta Prabhu calls them the accommodationists, that these people are trying to accommodate the narrative found in the Mahabharata to whatever is the respectable views of human society with whom they are interacting. Now, we should be careful as people who claim to accept the authority of the Srimad Bhagavatam, that we do not commit such errors. It is our duty to serve the Srimad Bhagavatam as a literalist, and that is exactly how we'll take it. If the fifth canto says whatever it says about the structure of the universe, we will accept it as true. And if the Bhagavatam sociology dictates stratification of the varnas, stratification of the genders, we'll simply accept it as true. We do not try to adjust and interpret the teachings of the Vedas, including the teaching of the Bhagavatam, because if we try to do that, that would defy the authority of the Bhagavatam. It is foolish to think of oneself as more intelligent than Srila Vyasadeva. Srila Vyasadeva presented the Vedanta Sutra and Srimad Bhagavatam, and he has come to certain conclusions, and it is foolish to think that we are as good or better than Vyasadeva. Vyasadeva has clarified the meaning of the Upanishads in the Vedanta Sutra. So if I claim to understand the meaning of the Upanishads, I cannot come to a conclusion which is different from Srila Vyasadeva's conclusion. That is the point that Lord Chaitanya is making here. He has already expressed himself in his sutras, and there is no need of help from personalities of lesser importance. This is a very, very important point to acknowledge and understand, that Vyasadeva has already come to a conclusion, and it is our duty to simply accept his conclusions. Shankaracharya or any other Acharya who comes up with his own conclusions differing from Vyasadeva's understanding of the Upanishads as presented in the Vedanta Sutra is certainly of lesser importance. His work, the Vedanta Sutra, is as dazzling as the midday sun, and when someone tries to give his own interpretations on the self-effulgent, sun-like Vedanta Sutra, he attempts to cover this sun with the cloud of his imagination. Again, this is a mistake that we should not commit. The teachings of Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam, and Chaitanya Charitamrita are as dazzling as the midday sun, and it is our duty to simply try to understand it as it has been presented by the liberated Acharyas and Srila Prabhupada, and not try to come up with our own fancy interpretations as we seem to be doing nowadays in ISKCON. The Vedas and Puranas are one and the same in purpose. They ascertain the absolute truth which is greater than everything else. The absolute truth is ultimately realized as the absolute personality of Godhead with absolute controlling power. Now here is another important point, that the four Vedas, their teachings are clarified in the Puranas. The four Vedas themselves state that the Itihasas and Puranas constitute the fifth Veda, and therefore the Puranas clarify the meaning of the Vedas, the four Vedas. So the Vedas, which include the Upanishads are the concluding portions of the four Vedas. They are the philosophical, explicitly philosophical content within the four Vedas. And the Upanishads, they simply say that there is an absolute truth greater than everything else. However, the Puranas clarify that that absolute truth is Lord Narayana, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he has absolute controlling power. The Puranas are graded as Sattvic, Rajasic and Tamasic. And because even though the Puranas are fully acceptable, they have a certain technique of presenting the subject matters, and those Puranas which are meant for a Sattvic audience, they directly talk about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Vedic system is meant for gradual elevation, and therefore the Puranas have to be understood in line with the technique based on which Srila Vyasadeva has chosen to educate human population. So even though we are talking about understanding the Vedas through the Puranas, to be even more specific, we need to understand the Puranas themselves through the Sattvika Puranas. By the way, this is from the Tattva Sandarbha of Jiva Goswami, and this text in blue here, this is a text from the Matsya Purana, which clarifies that the Puranas are divided into Sattvic, Rajasic and Tamasic, corresponding to the different audiences, and we need to understand the absolute truth from the Sattvic Puranas, because from the mode of goodness we understand the absolute truth. So the absolute truth is ultimately realized as the absolute personality of Godhead with absolute controlling power. He is Ishvara, he is Bhagavan. Aishwaryasya samagrasya viryasya yashashriya jnana vairagyayoschaiva shannam bhagaitingana. In Vishnu Purana, which is a Sattvika Purana, the expression Bhagavan has been analyzed. Bhaga stands for 6 opulences which have been enlisted here: fame, wealth, wisdom, beauty, power, renunciation. And that personality who possesses all of them to an unlimited degree, he is actually fit to be called as Bhagavan. He is properly fit to be called Bhagavan. Bhagavan actually refers to that person, and factually speaking, that refers to Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yet the transcendental personality of Godhead is astonishingly ascertained as impersonal. So Lord Chaitanya very politely says that it's very astonishing that the followers of Shankaracharya like you have ascertained that the supreme absolute truth, which is actually the transcendental personality of Godhead, you have ascertained that absolute truth to be impersonal. But in reality, the absolute truth is not impersonal at all. The absolute truth is the supreme personality of Godhead. Even we should not misunderstand that our conception is of triple Godhead. There is no triple Godhead. That is Bhagavan. Bhagavan is the supreme personality of Godhead. We are monotheists. There is only one Godhead. He is partially perceived as Paramatma and vaguely perceived as the impersonal Brahman. There is no impersonal Brahman or localized Paramatma separate from the supreme personality of Godhead, Bhagavan.